Benji, thanks so much for coming on our BraveCo podcast. I am super excited to do this with you and to sit down and kind of unpack a little bit of your story. But before we get started, I just want to let everyone know who you are.
Yeah.
So Benji Nolot, I just actually asked you how to say your last name. You're a filmmaker, but you are the CEO and founder of Exodus Cry,
Yes.
which basically exists to shut down, eradicate pornography, sex slave trafficking.
Yeah.
I mean, change the culture
Yeah.
in our society today,
Yeah.
which is massive. You guys have some really big campaigns going on right now, and we're going to talk about those. We'll unpack some of those and maybe even stuff that I don't know about. But you guys did, you guys put a major crushing blow to Pornhub.
Yeah.
Was that 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Can you explain that just for a little bit? I want everyone to know, like, coming in, just like give us a little bit of what that campaign was about and what actually happened there.
Yeah. So at the end of 2019, going into 2020, one of my colleagues had been investigating Pornhub, their kind of like website and their model for distribution of pornography.
Yeah.
And it's a user-based upload model. So it's kind of like the YouTube of porn, which has become kind of like the prominent way for porn to be distributed online.
Right.
So what she discovered is that their moderator system was like painfully insufficient, negligible, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So
basically anything can get posted. No one's really editing it or checking it or making sure that
exactly
it's kosher. Yeah.
And so what she discovered is that Pornhub is infested with videos of real abuse, trafficking, rape, all of these things. And it was a crime scene. Wow. And so she wrote an article in the Washington Examiner called "It's Time to Shut Down Pornhub." And basically the focus was exposing how their site, their model is enabling and, videos of real trafficking, all these things to be on there, and that they're profiting from that as well.
Holy
and
smokes.
Then when things were being reported to them, not doing anything about it. So it's a bigger kind of like crime story. But that article struck a nerve and it like went viral, and all these other outlets were picking up the story. And so people were like, you guys, should start a petition. So we started a petition that went viral. That got over 2 million signatures.
What was the petition? Was the petition like, we need to shut down Pornhub?
Yeah. So for anybody that may be out there listening to this, watching this, who is not aware, Pornhub is it's the most prominent brand of the world's largest, so the parent company MindGeek owns Pornhub. They own 90% of all online porn.
No way.
Yeah. Pornhub is their kind of like, I don't know how to say it, flagship, their royal diadem, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And they tried to make it with a lot of intentionality and PR work, the kind of like pop culture, cheeky, porn chic brand in their branding, marketing, advertising, all of that. They would have ads in Times Square. They would sponsor things like Fashion Week. They were do little pop-ups, all that kind of stuff. So they were endeared to the culture. So we did this article that was like a expose of what's really going on, and it stirred something. And it did, in a way, become this David versus Goliath battle where we were like really punching up at this like porn behemoth, and a whole grassroots movement that could see what we were seeing now rose up. So this petition gets 2 million signatures. Then we launch a short animated video that goes viral. It's 2 minutes long, just basically, going, look, all this stuff's going on Pornhub. That gets 33 million video views. And then that put us in touch with Nick Kristof, kind of like this. He's like a legendary investigative reporter for the New York Times.
Wow.
Wrote an article called "The Children of Pornhub," and that continued to kind of escalate kind of the level of impact across the culture of making people aware of what was going on. So then that put us in touch with the credit card companies, and who then pulled out from Pornhub when they
So
were made
that was
aware.
like a major blow, wasn't it?
That was a death blow. That was like, that was like a, what is that bomb I saw? I recently heard the name of one of our bombs. It's called the mother of all bombs. Like literally
the
like the Moab.
Yeah.
It was like dropping a Moab on them. And
So all these credit card companies were like, we don't want to be associated with Pornhub.
yeah,
And they went, you can't use our services.
yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. So we hit them with a torpedo on that one. And then we kind of put out a list of demands, like you got to remove the download button, delete all the videos that are unverified, a bunch of things. So they deleted 80% of their website, removed the download
No
features, to
way.
fundamentally alter the whole model that they were using. But for us, we have so much evidence and whistleblowers and from inside the organization and stuff showing the complicity of the executives, as that it's like when Harvey Weinstein was being exposed.
Right.
People were like, hey, you should stop taking advantage of and raping
Yeah.
these young actresses. That wasn't the message. It was like, this guy needs to go to jail.
Right.
And so we're contending for a higher level of accountability. And so now there's like the thing has spread, which is what we started as our little campaign called Trafficking Hub. We met I have some friends down in Carlsbad. They have this place called Nations. We used their space and we met for a week at the very beginning to ideate the whole campaign. The thing launched, all this stuff went viral, and then it became a movement.
Dude.
And all these organizations and
That
law
had to be,
enforcement,
like, surreal.
yeah, it was insane. Yeah.
Because it's like I picture it, it's like you're pulling a thread and all of a sudden the whole sweater just starts to completely unravel. Because surely you didn't think, when you started that, you didn't think like, oh, we're gonna drop the Moab. Like this is gonna go.
Yeah.
It shows you the power though of when people jump on board, when the everyday person jumps on board and goes, enough. Like there's an army of people.
Yeah.
They just don't know that they're an army.
Yeah.
People have a lot of pull. So there has to be people inside of Pornhub that hate you.
Yeah.
Is that, do they know who you are?
Not just in Pornhub, but in the whole porn industry.
Okay.
I recently did
like,
a
are you
podcast.
famous in the porn industry?
Well, I recently did a podcast with a lady who I actually really like. She's a very cool person. She happens to be one of the more prominent faces in porn in terms of like following and things like that. And I was on her podcast.
Like she
and
promotes porn.
she's a porn performer.
Oh, wow.
So
and you
she's-
were on her podcast.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know. Yeah, it was wild. Yeah, she's like 2.6 million followers on Instagram. She's very prominent, but I actually really like her. She's a very cool person.
Yeah.
But we were having this conversation and I was like, the area where we agree is we want to get exploitation out of this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we need to bring that conversation into the porn industry.
Yeah.
She goes, well, you're enemy number one in the porn industry. So I don't know if that's going to happen. So I was like, wow. It was kind of like it was a surreal moment of just, what is happening? And there's a backstory to this, which I'll tell you off camera, unfortunately. Sorry, guys.
No, it's all good.
But seeing what's happening now,
Yeah.
the things that have been set in motion is, I think they're very providential in some ways.
Yeah.
And, but the thing that has resonated with the larger culture is just this aspect that like, and what I love seeing is people just going like, dude, like this is not okay. You know, I mean, the Me Too movement,
Right.
you know, the thing that Harvey Weinstein being exposed to Me Too is people understanding the severity of like the sexual exploitation and harassment and, you know, the trafficking and just people want to see that eradicated. And, you know, Pornhub was found red-handed, caught, like they were caught red-handed, caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And now there's a whole movement that wants to hold them accountable.
Wow.
So a bunch of lawsuits then began to get filed. There's more coming. And those lawsuits present an existential threat to MindGeek. Their entire existence is a smoking.
Which is like the whole different, like that's the real beast.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least a major portion of it.
Yeah.
So, man, I just want to like crack this whole thing open.
Yeah.
Which we will.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
People have no idea. Like the average person has no idea the type of porn that kids are consuming, how much of it is really available, really out there, what's happening, like really what's happening behind the scenes, what type of person's getting brought onto the set, all the agreements that are made. The average person's pretty, you know, when I think back to porn in my life, I go all the way back to where I found it, which thank God was before the internet, right? Born in 1980, found porn at 14, so 1994.
Okay.
Ish.
Yeah.
And it was my friend had stolen his dad's magazines, right? Playboys. Completely different day and age of porn. Static pictures. They don't talk back to you. They're not acting out. It's just a page.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about the difference in addiction when it comes to, you know, a magazine versus what we're seeing today, but a very different upbringing. My friends had stole some VHS tapes from, bad stuff from
I remember those days.
Like Blockbuster or whatever.
Yeah.
But like very rare that you had that people had access to porn.
Yeah, exactly. Growing up, we were more like porn opportunists in the sense that like you could go out into a field and like, oh, you might stumble on a magazine or there was a video, you know, in high school being passed around, you know, and like it's unfortunate. Like I think back on those same things of like, man, I'm sad that my child self was exposed to those things at that age, or even just at all. But
I actually had to be at home without anybody there to watch it.
Yeah.
You know, I had to have a VHS tape to put in to watch that. I mean, completely different day and age as opposed to this fast paced, highly addictive, highly interactive. I looked up some stuff today in preparation and was actually watching the video that you guys created. What, Hooked on Porn? Is that what it's called?
Raised on Porn.
Raised on Porn, sorry. And man, the statistics in there are just crazy. Like it was talking about, I think one lady was explaining how the porn that kids watch first right now, when they get, if you search porn, you go onto Pornhub, it's like the gonzo porn. It's the highly violent. Like kids aren't watching in it. Christians would typically go, it doesn't matter. Like porn's bad in general. Like just put it all in one thing and go, it's bad, which we would all agree like, hey, porn's bad.
Yeah.
But when you start introducing kids into this violent, hyper violent, like with sexual, it just does something to their brain. It's completely different than the storyline that I saw when I was a kid, right? Because on the VHS tape, what I saw as a kid was two people pretending like they were hooking up and kind of like they liked each other.
Yeah.
And then they are complying it looks like husband and wife, or maybe they're having an affair or something,
Right.
but there's no violence in it.
Yeah.
So I don't look at that and go, oh, women want to be punched in the face.
Right.
And then like all this crazy acts on top of that. Or, what a woman really likes is when I choke her. Like she said that most of the porn on Pornhub today is violent porn or rape porn, and that you'd have to actually go search to find. Like a kid would have to go search to find like the kind stuff, whatever it is, consensual porn that we used to watch.
Yeah.
So that's pretty insane.
Just to kind of pull back a bit to frame some of this, I've got so many things as you're talking. I'm just like, oh, yes, yeah. There's so many threads to pull on with this issue. I want to just provide a little bit of framing for people that are, connecting in with this on.
And I want to find out too about your childhood. And so we are going to go back too. So,
cool. Okay. When we talk about human sexuality, we're talking about something that is so existential to our humanity.
Yeah.
It's something that is such a central part of who we are as humans. Nobody gets out of it. We all have a sexuality. And in my observation and, based on kind of a lot of the research that we've done and people that we've talked to, psychologists and therapists and neurologists and things like that, I have kind of developed this framework of human sexuality where I see it in three primary categories: relational sexuality, an object sexuality, and a malevolent sexuality.
Okay.
And so relational sexuality would be something that is flirtatious and joyful and playful and life-giving. And what do you want? And then, there's a reciprocation of mutuality and empathy, and you're co-creating an experience that's mutually edifying and fulfilling and satisfying. And it's meant to enhance the other person's humanity and pleasure and all of those things. And object sexuality is more rooted in the idea of like, you exist for my pleasure. And so what can I take from you, not what can I give to you? It's not exploring something together out of mutuality and empathy. It's consuming another, taking from another for my own pleasure and gratification. A malevolent sexuality is a sexuality that is aimed at destroying another person. So it's enacting a person's humanity for the purpose of destroying it. So it's an extinguishing of goodness and innocence and a robbing and a feeding off of another person to gain some kind of sadistic, malevolent pleasure. And so it's this idea of like evacuating all of my own internal existential hopelessness, despair, pain, anguish, rage, etc., into another person who has no choice but to receive it because they've been subjugated. And so a malevolent sexuality is like kind of like violent towards not just a person's physical body, but towards their spirit and the crushing of their sexual spirit. And so I think for me, that framework has been helpful when I look at pornography and its trajectory over the past 50 plus years and its impact on shaping culture. So if you go back to the launch of Playboy magazine in 1953. I think there's been like what we've seen in the last 70 years is two major evolutions of human sexuality.
Okay.
Both directly knit to pornography. So the first one, if you go back to the launch of Playboy magazine in 1953, was a kind of like taking sexuality from a more kind of like relational sexuality. I'm talking in a kind of like a broader sense of our culture. Now, of course, there's always been deviations of that, but in the larger sense of our culture. And what Playboy did is it triggered an evolution into an object sexuality. And that was based on the way that he presented women as these two-dimensional objects who exist for male pleasure.
Yeah.
So Playboy industrialized the lust. It was an industrialization of lust. Every image was meant to capture the lustful gaze of men, and on the male side of it, and to view women as objects.
Yeah.
Somebody asked Hugh Hefner in an interview, "Do you worry about objectifying women?" And his answer was, "Women are objects, are sexual objects." So he wasn't like shy about that point. And so, but as social beings, for young men growing up in this world and beginning to learn about sex through this introduction of pornography into our world, I think began to internalize the message of Playboy and the construction of their ideas about who women are.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful and like potent, visceral visual medium that combines neurological arousal, physiological arousal, but also the infusion of a story, like deep into the social fabric of our being. And so what we saw is human sexuality go from something that was in a more widespread way associated with like this relational idea of like relational sexuality to an object sexuality.
Yeah.
And that was catalyzed by Playboy. So then the internet came along, and this is a very long-winded way of getting to your point.
I love it because it's super interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it around to the point that you brought up is because some people might be listening to this or watching this and hear you talking about like the violence, just not having like a great, like, what meaneth thou this? Like, why?
How did we get here? Yeah.
Yeah. And so the internet comes along, and what happened with the internet is, since sexuality triggers novelty, drug addiction, you need more. Sex addiction, you want different. It's more of a novelty addiction.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you say that again? So drug addiction, you want more. Like, I want more heroin. I need more.
Keep getting higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sex addiction, you want different. I need a different person to see.
Yeah. You're not trying to get higher. You're trying to get arousal. And what brought the arousal at first no longer works.
Yeah.
So you need new and different.
Right.
And so there's novelty. And so when the internet came along, what happened is that now, to your point earlier, people had so much accessibility to porn in an anonymous way. Like, you could be in your bedroom under the sheets, like on the internet, and that people were just being mainlined pornography straight into their veins. There was so much consumption of pornography and so much more pornography now available at the click of a button that it quickly began to evolve in terms of the escalation from this to this to this to this. And what it became is very violent.
Yeah.
And so what Gail Dines was mentioning in Raised on Porn is this genre of gonzo porn, which is kind of violent in nature. And so what we've seen happen, is now this second great evolution of human sexuality in a widespread way. And we went from a relational sexuality, Playboy came along, that birthed an evolution into an object sexuality. Then the internet came along, and that birthed an evolution into a malevolent sexuality. And so now where, like what some of you were mentioning, where someone's very first sexual encounter might involve being choked out. It might involve a gangbang. It might involve, having anal sex. Like and so what's up with that? There's a conditioning in the mind, heart, and sexual spirit of young people growing up on porn that is developing these malevolent appetites in the realm of sexuality. So I've met with some of the pornographers who are creating that stuff, and it's very intentional in terms of what they're trying to do. And maybe we can touch on that in a minute, but
Yeah.
I wanted just to provide a little bit of context to your point about the violence. So, hopefully our viewers can see this sociological evolution, escalation, progression of our sexuality into this landscape that we're now dealing with, where we go, dude, like it's violent, it's malevolent,
and the trajectory.
yeah. And where's this going?
Where is this going?
Yeah.
With the all the, what is it, the virtual reality stuff?
Right.
Crazy, which we don't want to get into right this second. But
Right.
before we go much further, I want to just bring it back to, where'd you grow up?
Yeah.
How did you get into this? How did this become like, was this always a passion for you?
Yeah. So I grew up in South Orange County, California. And I was the youngest of 4 kids. So I feel like I was a bit kind of like sheltered from maybe a lot of things that were going on that I just, in my home, whatnot, that I wasn't aware of, as the baby of the family.
Yeah.
So in some ways I had like an idyllic childhood. I was out riding motorcycles, surfing, doing things that kids love to do, hunting for snakes, fishing.
Yeah.
When I was 11, I saw a movie called The Accused, and this movie is about a woman named Cheryl Arroyo. It's a real life story. She's played by Jodie Foster in the movie, but this woman was actually gang raped in a bar for 2 hours by 4 men.
No way.
And and the bar patrons were like cheering, and it was this horrific kind of like gang rape scenario that took place in this public place. So the movie is about that and then her ensuing fight for justice.
Do you know what year that took place? Like what year that happened? I'm just
not
curious.
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
that's a crazy thing to happen.
Yeah. Crazy. And so I see that as an 11-year-old. And what happened for me is it kind of like awakened me to the knowledge of the presence of evil in the world.
Yeah.
And so my heart just became like pierced with this idea that rape has to be the worst thing that could ever happen to a person.
Right.
And, moving on from that, I mean, I had no ability to like process that at 11.
Absolutely.
But it left a mark on me.
Yeah.
And then a number of things happened throughout my life, but just to kind of fast forward to my burning bush moment, what I would describe as my burning bush moment is February 3rd, 2007, discovering the issue of human trafficking and like learning for the first time that this idea of rape, that it wasn't a thing that was happening, on the fringes of society, one here and one there.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a whole system that is drawing women, preying on vulnerable, marginalized women and children, and pulling them into this system of the larger global commercial sex industry to be prostituted in stripping, escorting, brothels, pornography, and so really being forced into lifestyles of systematic rape. And there's like cam footage in some of these brothels where you'll see like there's like a hallway and then some rooms, and there's nothing but a sheet that they open and close to go in and out, and the men come in, do what they do, leave, the next. This is the lifestyle for a lot of like these people who are trapped in this this hell, this nightmare. So when I found out about that, all those feelings as a 11-year-old came flooding back in, and it launched me into a season of just research, study, prayer, travail. And then the fall of 2007, a lady approached me. She said, "Look, I know you don't know me. My name, is Gloria. I'm a widow, but God has told me to give you $10,000 to start an organization to fight human trafficking."
Wow.
And that,
How would she know that?
how would she? Yeah. Well, so I think she had like heard me speak at a conference or something, but for me, it was like a profound moment where I felt like God was saying, it's time to put feet to your prayers.
Were you a filmmaker at this time? Is that why you were speaking at conferences?
So I had spoken at this particular, so in the early parts of 2007, February, I learned about this issue. And 2 days later, I lead a prayer set at the House of Prayer. Misty Edwards is the worship leader. It's a great team at that time. It was amazing. But I'm telling them now about human trafficking. We're going to pray for this. So 2 days in, I was already the resident expert on human trafficking. So like,
Totally.
I had to,
Totally.
So, 7 months in, it was like, dude, get this guy up on the main, that's, and
so you're leading the charge. You're leading the prayer time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's rad.
So she gave us this, and that was the catalyst to then take the next step into formalizing the burden that we have for human trafficking and our efforts to fight against it, and actually putting feet to our prayers. And so that's been a little bit of my trajectory, like into this space. I mean, we can go in a few different directions with that, but just to kind of give a little bit of like a nutshell.
As far as the human trafficking side of this, how much do you guys focus on human trafficking versus the pornography and the Pornhub and game? What is it? What's the brain hub or brain stuff?
Mind Geek.
Mind Geek, yeah. How much do you focus on each one of those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So coming into this, I think, I found out about human trafficking, some really like horrific stories. Like one that I read was this girl, Debbie, who at 15 years old, young girl, was in her house with her family. A friend called, said, I'm going to be driving by. She goes outside in her SpongeBob pajamas. Turns out her friend had been trafficked, and the traffickers were luring her to lure her friend. She goes out to give her friend a hug. They pull her into this car. They blindfold her, put a gun to her head, drive her around the city to disorient her, take her to an apartment, gang rape her, put her in a little dog kennel, and prostitute her out for 40 days before she's eventually found. There's some tip that's given, and they find her. So we know her story because she got found.
Wow.
But like it. So for me at first, like I was like, that's what trafficking looks like. It looks like somebody gets abducted.
Yeah.
And then when this widow gave us those initial funds, and it kind of like catalyzed our efforts to take it a step further, there was so little awareness at that time on human trafficking that we felt like that the best thing that we could do initially was to just help tell this story.
Yep.
And so we decided to make a documentary. And it was really the process of making that documentary that expanded our understanding of what human trafficking is, how it functions and operates in different parts of the world, and all the complexities of the underlying issues. And so it was really, we found that it was a much bigger, more complicated issue than we originally thought of, like just somebody being abducted. But it was during the filming of that documentary, which is called Nefarious, that we began to see the overlap of pornography.
Yeah.
And so it would be like, going into a red light district in Amsterdam, and there's pimps, they're handing out pornography, advertising the girls in the windows or the sex show down the street. And so we saw where pornography was being used to market women in trafficking and prostitution. That was one thing. Then we saw that we learned through talking to survivors that some of them were actually used in pornography. So they were trafficked and then they were forced to make pornography. And then we saw, as we talked to Johns and sex buyers, how the one commonality among all of them is that they had a history of pornography consumption. And so we saw how it was fueling the demand side of trafficking. And then we started to investigate the porn industry a little bit, doing some interviews and things like that, and began to learn that the entire backdrop of like mainstream pornography is a system of coercion, and that is an element of trafficking. And so we began to see where even the mainstream porn industry was operating in a realm of trafficking. And so during that journey of making Nefarious, we began to understand and see what a massive role pornography had in this. And so after we released that in 2011, 2012, we went back to the drawing board and whiteboarded a whole strategy to, we have to look deeper into this. And that started a whole new season for us.
Man, I mean, it's like overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it's so deep. Like, how do you get to the bottom of this crazy sexual exploitation?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you have the everyday consumer who doesn't really care how they get it, for the most part, or doesn't typically think about,
right,
well, where did this come from?
Right.
There's just a massive demand.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have just people who don't care how they make it. Yeah. I mean, what a crazy, twisted world.
Yeah.
Man, it is just so overwhelming.
I think the most disturbing thing about it for me so when we had this like whiteboard strategy session, we talked about going after pornography from two sides, from the public health side, like the public health crisis side, to the human rights crisis side.
Yeah.
And so we looked at how is porn impacting consumers, and then, how is it being made? What is its impact on those who are being used to create the porn? So we wanted to address it from public health, human rights, two different sides.
Yeah.
I think, and both are honestly just so disturbing. Having spent time in the space now for 15 years, it's just, there's so much to unpack on both sides of that. But I think the thing for me that stands out like the most is, and it's hard to even put in those terms, but just knowing that children are being exposed to this, because a child would not conceive of the things that they're being exposed to. What you have is this small demographic of pornographers in the San Fernando Valley who are creating this content. The thing for them is they're so far downriver, they're so far along in their own journey, that the content they're creating is of this more malevolent nature, and it's really disturbing stuff. And so, like, I asked one pornographer, because he was sharing his brand of pornography and how he makes it and all this stuff. And at one point, it just made sense to ask him this question. I asked him, "Are you a sociopath?" And his answer to me was, "Well, I'm not really sure what a sociopath is, but I'm a hardcore pornographer." And he goes, "And I didn't get here overnight. It took me 20 years to get to this place." And so he was like very well aware of like how dark and how
and almost proud of it.
Oh, totally.
Like,
yeah,
I've spent a lot of time working on my career.
Yeah, totally.
You don't get here overnight.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so there are people like him who are so far, their conscience has been so seared, their hearts are so callous. They are quite literally sociopaths, and their approach to pornography is finding impressionable young girls who aren't entirely sure what's going to happen, and then overwhelming them in the context of the scene, so that the viewer can observe their innocence being taken on camera and them being overwhelmed and broken. Like he said, I asked him to talk about, what do you want to see happen on set? And he said, he's elaborating all these different ways. He says, so she's shaking, she's shivering. And then he goes, because she's so like frazzled by what's going on, her whole nervous system is being fried. And he goes, and then I just lay it on harder, and I lay it on harder, and I lay it on harder until they snap, until they're on a heap on the floor. And he goes, and that's the most beautiful thing in the world. And like, so his explicit overt objective is to break these people, but do it on camera.
Wow.
So that viewers at home can consume it, because it becomes the heady wine of the person whose sexuality has evolved into a malevolent sexuality that needs that more sadistic consumption of innocence to get that arousal. And so bottle that up. And now imagine that is what is being fed to a generation of young kids. So for me, like, that's the most disturbing thing about it, where I go, some people are pro porn, this, that. Yeah, everyone's got different views on everything. Right. I think the area where we can like all agree in this culture is that this is, and I don't even want to call it adult content, because that gives it some kind of like legitimacy. I think it's criminal, but it's called adult content specifically because it's not for children. Yeah. Yet a whole generation of children is being exposed to this inadvertently, unwittingly. It's trespassing into their lives. It is unwanted sexual exposure. It is literally a neurological assault against their sexuality.
Yeah, it really is.
And I think that we all can agree that like we don't want that to happen.
Yeah. Like there was this phrase on your guys' website that said porn is now like the global sex education for kids. Yeah. And it like so you don't really think about it, but oh my gosh, the average kid is 8 or 9 years old when they're exposed to porn, or as young as 8 or 9, all the way up to 11 years old, and experiencing learning about sex and relationship, boy or girl, doesn't really matter. Because we typically think like, oh, guys are the ones that are consuming porn. Nowadays, it's both. Yeah. And so a young girl who's 11 years old and is watching porn, who's already in maybe a little bit of pain, disconnected relationship with her parents, and maybe that's the place that she's going to find a little bit of excitement or comfort, or all the reasons why we use pornography. Mm-hmm. She's learning, this is what you have to look forward to in relationship. Yeah. This is what guys want. This is what girls want. This is what being a sexual being looks like, is you are objectified, you're dominated, and that's supposed to be pleasing. Yeah. What a problem. Yeah. As an understatement, like talk about a pandemic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, as Raquel Welch said, it's annihilating a generation of men. It's fracturing the sexuality of both boys and girls. And it's so just kind of like pulling back from that, observing that, framing that, there's the question, what now? And for us, that's why we've tried to begin to deploy some of these campaigns, is so that we can move the needle on how pornography is able to even be in our world, similar to the campaign that was undertaken to around smoking, and where at one time you can go anywhere without people are smoking in their cars and restaurants and everywhere. There's smoke everywhere.
And doctors are going, oh, that's good for you. Here's the brand we recommend.
Yeah. And there was a few whistleblowers like inside of these tobacco companies are like, guys, like this is not good. It took a while, but the thing shifted. Awareness began to come out. People began to understand, oh, I can get cancer. They started to do commercials with people with holes in their throat. And that really shifted things in the way that, cigarettes even were allowed to be in our world. And so, the internet is still relatively new. We haven't had that moment yet. And yet we are now at that point. And so the trafficking hub, I think, is, and this is using other people's languages who've been at this battle for a while, was probably the most significant thing to happen ever in terms of the advocacy to regulate and oppose pornography.
Yeah.
And what it's done is it created a flashpoint in which now we're going to address all these other things. So
set like a major precedence.
Yeah. And the next thing, so the campaign, a new wave of this campaigning for us is the Protect Kids Not Porn campaign. And
That's
that
awesome.
one is we're demanding that big tech and big porn be required to have age verification walls in place for the hosting and distributing of all pornographic content.
So right now, anyone can get on Pornhub? Or
Anybody can get on Pornhub. Anybody can get on Google, hit the wrong button, Pokemon, images, and boom, a whole porn thing could pop up. It's reckless negligence because of financial motive on the part of these big tech and big porn corporations.
On some respects, I feel so naive, right? Because honestly, I haven't looked at porn since I was 16 years old. Once I quit it in high school, I was done. Yeah. I was completely addicted to it, porn and masturbation. Then, so I had a conversation with Michael Dinsmore 8 months ago.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, what are you up to? Because we were friends. And he said, man, I'm working with Exodus Cry. And he started telling me all this stuff and about violent porn. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I didn't even know. And I've worked with sex addicts for a long time. Yeah. I just didn't get into the nitty gritty of like, well, tell me exactly what, and I haven't searched anything my whole life on the internet. Never one time searched in. So unless unless you've been in that world, you don't even know. Like it's mind blowing to think. I know that you can get on to the internet and find whatever you're looking for. Yeah. But the idea that a place like Pornhub or doesn't have any way of regulating, like there's not an 8-year-old on there just consuming is mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's criminal. It's criminal. The internet is a city without walls. It is a place where people can openly peddle this visual heroin that you can't just flush out of your system.
Right.
And now we have the research to know the devastating impact it's having on the sociological, emotional, sexual, neurological development of children and affecting relationships. We're seeing, it's just having such a profound effect. So that's the negative. The positive is like, okay, we're going to do something about this now. And so this campaign is aimed at requiring age verification walls around the hosting and distributing of all pornographic content so that kids can't just inadvertently stumble on it or it come trespassing onto them when they're online. And so the idea of this campaign is partly to raise awareness about kind of like the secondhand smoke concept, like the damage of the public health side of this. But part of it is also to advocate for deeply embedded and concretized change through law that will make our world safer for the next generation of children. And so I think that, I just think it's such an important undertaking for this moment that we're at in history. I look at Twitter, for example. Twitter is this, multi-billion-dollar company, major social media platform. They welcome users as young as 13 according to their terms and services.
Yep.
And it's not that Twitter, that some pornographic content gets through. It is essentially the marketing arm for the porn industry. Wow. As soon as you go to porn, you get your Twitter page, you're dropping porn all over that. That's part of what drives and feeds people to go to the websites, pay for the, da-da-da-da. So there's no, it's just there. And I'm talking the most graphic, heinous, brutal videos just rightly available on Twitter. And so the question for Twitter is, what are you?
Like, where's the ethics in that?
Yeah, like, are you you're welcoming users at 13. So like, is this a platform for children? But you're also welcoming hardcore, graphic, body punishing, violent pornography to be visible right away. So, or are you a platform for adults? They won't answer the question.
Wow.
And that's the part of us as a society, or we as a people have to begin to collectively raise our voice together as a movement to demand answers. Like, you need to answer for what you are intentionally exposing children to.
Right.
You're inviting them into a porn universe, and it's criminal. And so this campaign would require, again, Twitter to have to put age verification. Well, like at 13, you wouldn't be able to get on their site.
Which you shouldn't be able to.
Yeah. And you would have to have a government issued ID in order to. And so that is.
Which they got to be fighting. I mean, nobody in the porn industry wants that. Well, at least the hardcore. And Twitter doesn't want that. And I'm sure because there goes a whole bunch of their customers and their future customers. And that's crazy.
And there's a whole malevolent spiritual reality over it that at some level you just have to pull back and just acknowledge that, like, this is really evil. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be some other organizing malevolent force beyond this than just some bad people. Yeah. Like it's really evil.
It's super evil.
And so there are, exceptions in terms of, like an individual performer who maybe thinks, I want to be a good person and, this is how I make my money. So I wouldn't put that malevolent ownership on every person in porn. Mm. But it's just to say that when you pull back and you begin to observe pornography and its place in our world through a systems level analysis, you get to see the malevolent way that it's organized to prey on childhood consumers, hijack their sexuality from a young age, and set a trajectory in their life where they become lifelong consumers that ultimately deforms their sexuality and undermines their relationships. Yeah. And so I think, these campaigns that we're doing are super important to help galvanize a flashpoint in our culture where we can move the needle on pornography. The trafficking hub, addressing the way that porn's able to be distributed, the Protect Kids Not Porn, also addressing the way that people are able to access it, to prevent children, to protect children.
Yep.
And then we're launching a new campaign this spring. And that one will deal with the porn industry in a more direct way, bringing regulation into the porn industry. It's the largest multi-billion-dollar unregulated industry in the world. And their attempt to self-regulate has been non-existent.
Yeah.
And so that campaign we're going to be launching here soon, along with a docu-series that we're releasing. And that's the kind of like the third wave for us of this.
So for people who are listening to this, who want to get involved and want to make a difference, I mean, obviously going to Exodus Cry, but what's the best way that we can help?
We need to build a tribe. Like, we need to build a community of people who have an understanding that, of what needs to change in our world, and then a collective buy-in to be a part of making that happen.
Yeah.
And to be able to support each other in that.
Yeah.
And so for us, the success of Trafficking Him was a direct result of just your everyday
Yep.
soccer mom, 14-year-old to just your everyday person who goes, all sign the petition,
Yeah.
all share the short animated video.
Yeah.
Enough of us group together in that, pretty soon people like Nick Kristof and the New York Times start to pay attention. And then when they start paying attention, then the billionaires, then the credit card companies. So
Yep.
it's this whole thing of like, I feel like us, just kind of like building this tribe and partnering together and participating in these things that might seem menial or like, am I really making that big of a difference by signing a petition? Like, yeah, actually you are. The more of us that begin to do that, the more pressure, the more leverage. So, if someone's like, hey, I want to give my whole life to this, that's a different conversation. Yeah. But if somebody's like, I just want to, do something to make a difference.
So right now you guys are in the middle of a campaign with the Raised on Porn. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so you guys can go on and watch that. Watch it with your wife for sure.
Yep.
What's the age limit, do you think, for that?
I watched it with my 13-year-old and it was a great conversation starter for us to kind of start to talk about these issues. I would say,
watch it first. So here's what I like to do, right?
Yeah.
Is to watch it first and then decide if you've, a lot of parents in our world, in my world, they've already had lots of conversations with their kids. So this isn't their first introduction to, what pornography is, the damaging effects of it. It's another piece in the puzzle of it, which is a helpful educational piece. So watch it first, but I definitely invite you guys to watch it with your wives or with your friends and to get on board and really ask yourself, like, the thing for me as a husband is I look at what's my role, right? BraveCo, we're here to eradicate fatherlessness. And that's why we live, right? So we have a discipleship, 12-month discipleship course, and we disciple men. But when I think about the role of a man, one of the main roles of a man is to protect. I mean, anybody would agree with, anybody would agree with almost anybody nowadays. And 100 years ago, the role of protection was so much easier. Even 1,000 years ago, because somebody had to actually physically come into my proximity, come into my house in order to harm my kids or to change the way that they think. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Because I have control over my house and you would have to have so much time to actually influence and affect my family.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that role, that protection role has gotten so insane.
Yeah.
Because 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, I have people trying to get in, thinking night and day, marketing to my kids.
Totally.
Not passively. Like this is, and I think for us, this is part of what has really grit me over the past years is there's people's lives, a lot of people's lives who, like that guy that you interviewed, this is what makes him come alive.
Yeah.
Is the exploitation of our kids' innocence. And you can't you can no longer turn a blind eye to it. Yeah. If you're a parent, you can no longer just stand by and go, well, I hope somebody does something about that.
Right.
Because it's not even just the kids that are getting trafficked, which, is a massive issue.
Yeah.
And I don't even say that lightly.
Yeah.
But it's also, and including what's happening to your kids, the kid down the street, your husbands, your wives, what's being taught to them as normal. I mean, you're talking about some real damaging, life-altering, traumatic experiences when a child gets introduced to sex on that level. It's trauma. It's child abuse. I'm talking about the person watching it.
Yeah.
Of course, the person who's doing it.
Yeah.
But the person that's watching it, you would never sit down an 11-year-old and show them a violent video like that and think, oh, that's not traumatizing.
Right. Right.
I mean, you're talking about life altering, trauma abuse,
Right.
brain changing,
Yeah.
neurological pathways that will take years
Yeah.
to rework, rewire, undo. And so to me, I'm like, guys, this isn't like an optional, hey, do you want to have a culture of prayer in your home? This isn't like an optional, and there's a lot of things that we as people go, yeah, maybe our family will do this. To me, this is like not even a Christian or unchristian thing. This to me goes beyond denominational lines.
Totally.
This is our children, our families, the global family is being completely obliterated.
Yeah.
And unless we, well, the only way that we can really protect our kids is to jump in and be present, decide what's going to be in your home, but then we have to take action beyond that and to help go after the brain geek, the organizations in really practical ways. That's why I love the approach that you guys are taking. You're not just going, hey, porn's bad, don't watch it, but you're actually going after the very specific age, demographic, the way that people are getting access to it. And kind of like death by 1,000 cuts, chopping them down at the knees. Like, I think that's super smart.
Yeah.
So I want to encourage people that are watching this and listening to this. You can't sleep on it.
Yeah.
You can't sleep on as a man. I know I can't go, I'm doing my part to protect and promote and provide a really healthy place for my family. We are being completely exploited and robbed.
Yeah.
And we have to do something. So jumping in and taking initiative, signing the petitions, but also I think being an advocate to me is the next, like, I love how back in 2000, was it 7 with Misty Edwards?
Oh yeah.
When you were the resident sex slave trafficking expert.
Yeah.
He had
after 2 days.
2 days experience.
Yeah.
It's fun. The fun thing about that conversation is you really can be in just a short amount of time now because of the resources that you guys have created and other people like you that you can become an advocate. The average person can become an advocate and begin to, help educate the world around them. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, totally. And it's a whole thing. It's a whole thinking of, my house, my city, my country, my world. And, where are we called to make an impact, and okay, like starting with our house, and I'm releasing this book that I'm working on essentially for 10 years now called Raised on Porn, which is a robust resource on the subject matter that can really help be a guide for people to frame and understand the issue, its impact on our world, but also how to help children, yourself, your relationships, all this stuff. So I think, for us, like getting a hold of some resources, starting in our own home, then extrapolating it out to our city, to our nation. And the thing for us at Access Cry is we feel so uniquely called to the front lines of this space that we've been able to queue up some things that are sort of a slam dunk for people to get involved with. Like, dude, like all you got to do, say a prayer, send a donation, sign a petition. I mean, it's really easy to just be like, kaboom, like we're not asking you to go make the whole film. Send us $20 and like, that'll help us make the next one. And so,
and you guys have real results, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Really have a history,
tangible breakthrough. Yeah.
Kicking butt.
So,
man, it's exciting. Do you guys have resources for parents resourcing kids, like books that kids can read with their parents can read with their kids about pornography and the dangers? And do you guys have resources on your website for that at all?
So if people, we have a lot of resources. We have a whole resources page on our Raised on Porn website. So I think it's raisedonporn.com or .org, but Raised on Porn something.
We'll put links to that.
Awesome. And there's a whole resource page there. This book will be great to instruct parents in how to begin to have conversations, age appropriate conversations with their kids, and so yeah, I think it'll be really helpful to that end. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I wanted, I sense as we're kind of like coming towards a conclusion to this, I wanted to just mention one other caveat to this whole conversation, which is more on the human rights side of the equation of, how we understand pornography and frame pornography and view pornography in our world. And this one is really directed more for the purpose of people who find themselves in that cycle of consumption and having trouble kind of like breaking out of that.
Yep.
I do think that this framing that we're talking about is helpful. Just that all by itself can be really helpful to disrupt the fantasy so people can redirect sort of those triggers into hopefully something that's more healthy. Going and working out, going and fishing, finding something that stimulates the brain in a positive way.
Yep.
But when I went undercover into the porn industry, I had, old friends that would, say, I don't know how you do it. I would want to blah, 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 blah. I'm like, this is, it's going into the porn industry. It was so gnarly when you see how it's made and the lives of the people in it. You see the rampant exploitation, abuse, STIs, the spread of STIs, you hear from the pornographers, you observe what's happening to the performers. It's so utterly repulsive. And it had the absolute opposite effect of what I think most people would imagine.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to give like one example of that to help people deconstruct the cover narrative of pornography. Because the way that this, I'll say this, the way that this malevolent force of darkness, let's call it, evil, spreads in our world is through the creating deception, creating cover narratives to deceive us from the realities of the deeper truth that if we knew, we wouldn't be enticed by.
Yeah.
And so, I was, and I mean, I'm going to tell one short story.
Yeah, do it.
And
we have time. We've got plenty of time.
Tons of these stories, but I remember sitting with this young woman. And again, so for her, this young woman, right? You see her on Twitter advertising her porn, and it looks like somebody who likes this, wants this, deserves this, has been making money off of this. That's what it looks like. She's living it up. She is the sex worker, the empowered, liberated sex worker, right? They're presented as this way as almost like there's a subclass of women who exist for nothing more than the male sexual consumption. And so that would be your impression. And so then I meet with her, and she goes from being a two-dimensional object to this three-dimensional human with like real history, life experiences, preferences, and immediately kind of the cover narrative that two-dimensional image starts to dissipate and disappear. And I began to see this human coming out in the context of our interview. And it was always kind of a progression, because when they first sit down, they're so used to being in the persona that it becomes hard to compartmentalize between, am I this person or am I my real person?
Right.
You're in it long enough, and pretty soon the persona takes over the entirety. So you could always tell there was this so my objective was to try and reach their humanity. I want to see what's really there, not just who are you trying to be in this character that you've created. And with all of them, there were these powerful moments of self-realization where they cross these personal thresholds, and you'd really see their humanity come out. And those moments were powerful for me because I felt like the thing that I needed to see, and hopefully that viewers needed to see, to realize like pornography is not what you think.
Yep.
You're being lied to.
Yep.
You're absolutely being lied to. And it matters. It matters that you're being lied to.
Yep.
Because you're being lied to at the stakes of somebody else's life being destroyed. And like, I'm just like, it's one thing if you lie to me and maybe I'm just so checked out and dull and hurting in life that I'm like, so you lied. It's another thing if like you're lying to me and I'm participating in that lie in a way that's destroying somebody else's life. Now you're accountable.
Yep.
And so this girl, her story was so horrific when we really got into it. It was funny because she's trying to tell me like, oh, and then this happened. I'll be like, well, that sounded a little disturbing. And she goes, well, actually it was. And she's like, spilled her guts. And I'm like, and so you think even for her, it wasn't what she was planning to do. She just kind of like started to also become aware, like hearing herself talk, like this is actually kind of disturbing. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad we're sort of like both in agreement with that. She's 19 years old. And so at one point in the interview, this question felt like the most relevant thing to ask her. I said, you know, what is it that you really want in life?
Yeah.
And she goes, tears start to well up in her eyes. And she goes, I just want to be loved. That was like her response to that question. She goes, I just want to be loved. And then I said, what would that look like? And she goes, you know, just someone bringing me flowers. No one's ever brought me flowers before.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, man, like this young woman has been ravaged, but a total bypassing of her humanity to get there.
Yep.
And like at a deeper cellular heart level, you just want love and flowers. And so I was so floored in that moment. As the interview, I'm trying not to like break down. I want to keep my composure so she can have
her moment,
go through whatever is happening in her. But 2 days later, she called us from the hospital. She had been rushed to the hospital by a taxi because she had no one to take her because of complications from all the porn scenes she was shooting. She calls us. I'm like, you know, like we just met, but like somebody who cared in her whole life. Like we're the ones who cared because we asked her a few questions.
Yeah, you're the guy that she's calling.
Yeah. God. And when we had the opportunity to be the ones to bring her first flowers.
Wow.
And that moment of her like getting those flowers and what it meant to like, I have dignity. Like I have worth. There's people who care about, like I'm in the hospital with a UTI. That's not sexy. And it's like, but she knew like, we don't care about sexy. Yeah. We care about like goodness.
She could
and
put
love.
down that facade.
Yeah.
That persona.
We got to spend the whole day with her, take her out for lunch. And she was able just to let her hair down and be a little girl. And, you know, and
how does a girl like that get out of it? What would even be the chances that she could get out or her way out? Do you know?
Not easily. I think that, you know, part of the danger of pornography and the way that it functions in our world is as a form of enslavement. And what I mean by that is that when you appear on a video in a sexual scenario, there is a chain that is attached to you.
Yeah, for sure.
And it hijacks their identity. It robs them of their humanity, and it sets them in a context in which their only value comes from their sexuality. Now, let's say tomorrow you decide, dude, like I got this infection. Somebody else really showed that they cared about it. I don't even want to be in it anymore. Well, that video is alive forever online now.
You're pretty much blackmailed to that.
And so it just on a spiritual and psychological level is so enslaving. And so the first thing is like to anybody who might see this is thinking about starting an OnlyFans, going to porn, whatever. It's like, dude, you know, for me, I'm just like, don't do it. I'm like, think about this decision. There was one performer who said to us, she said, if I had the choice between being alive for another 40 years with all those videos out there versus being alive for 1 year, knowing that all those videos had been expunged, I would rather be alive for only the 1 year.
Wow.
Just with the freedom of knowing that stuff was off the internet.
Wow.
And so it's yeah, it's not easy, but you know, I know some of the ones who, so part of what happened for us is in these interviews, unintentionally, we would be transferring dignity back
Yep.
to these people where they would actually begin to cross these personal thresholds and have self-realization about their own worth
Yep.
as a human. So I think what happened for some of them is that after the interview, it jolted them into a perspective where they go like, I can't go back to porn.
Yep.
I never said like, hey, don't do porn. Like it was
Right.
just this very human connection that was happening that spawned all this.
Yeah.
So a lot of them ended up leaving, and some successfully, some not successfully. But there is a path out, and I think that the point I'm trying to make is just that it's difficult from the standpoint of the nature of pornography being online, and it's just it's so cruel.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
so utterly cruel.
Yeah. And I think going back to your original point that what porn is presenting people, it's a complete facade.
Yeah.
The whole entire thing. One, from this idea that there's no consequences.
Yeah.
People pretty much just think it's just porn, right? I'm just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like there's some devastating effects. And then on the back end, like you are 100% absolutely participating in the destruction of human beings
Yeah.
and the exploitation of people. Like it's not to say, oh, shame on you if you have a porn addiction, you're a horrible human being. It's to say like, hey, let's take some real personal responsibility and begin to repent, right? And repent from this massive selfish lifestyle that says consume at any cost. Really.
Yeah.
And you know, there's almost nothing more selfish than using someone else. I don't know of anything more selfish than using someone else to get your needs met in a way that destroys them.
Yeah.
It's such a problem. You know, guys, if you're watching this and you are struggling with pornography, one, that is a major reason why we created BraveCo. And I'm not just trying to pitch BraveCo. I'm literally saying that is a massive reason why we went, okay, let's do a 12-month discipleship course, not a 12-week course. Because it's really hard to change the ecosystem, the neural pathways, but the beautiful thing about your brain is your brain's a neuroplastic. So you can begin to change what you crave. You can begin to change what you think and where your brain naturally goes to based upon your history and your past and your present. And I've seen and worked with so many guys and some girls, but so many guys specifically who've been trapped in pornography, been completely addicted to it. I was completely addicted, like I said a little bit ago, back when I was 14 to 16. And it took me confessing to my parents and then to my family. And then at 15 years old, I wore a white t-shirt every day. In my, I think junior year of high school, I wanted something that reminded me every single day of who I was, because I found masturbation at 10 years old and was completely hooked until I was 16. And the struggle was so intense. The battle of addiction, I felt so enslaved to this invisible thing that I can't stop, that once I started to finally get a grip on it, I realized I need something every single day that reminds me of who I am. So I started wearing t-shirts every day, which wasn't the cool thing to do, because kids would be like, after a while, after like a week or two, my friends are like, bro, I was so desperate. I would just tell them like, hey, this is my way of reminding me of who I am. And that was my way out.
Wow.
Like that a physical thing that helped. And to me, all I'm saying to guys is like, you got to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
You're going to, the journey out back to full restoration. One, you need to know it's 100% possible. So there's a lie out there that says, man, I'm never going to get free from this thing, because so many guys have tried.
Yeah.
And but what I've learned is that when you can really help a guy understand the driver, what's actually driving this issue, and which isn't the craving for porn, but what's underneath it. How are you getting your needs met? What do you believe to be true about yourself? What are you doing about the trauma in your past? When you begin to heal those drivers, you can make it a fair fight. And so we see lots of success with guys getting free, lots of success with guys rebuilding their life, even healing their marriage. Worked with lots and lots of people healing their marriage. So there's real ways out, guys and girls. And I've seen a lot of marriages restored from affairs and pornography. And so I think, to me, in what I want people to walk away from, one is you can be change. You can get involved with Exodus Cry. You can make a difference. You can, but also if you're stuck in it, don't get bogged down in the shame. Don't get so thrown off from the shame of, oh my gosh, I'm contributing to this, that then you just go back into medicating. I guess I'm just a piece of crap human being and fall into that. Actually grab onto the testimonies and get yourself well. Is there anything you'd like to add, or?
I think you hit the nail on the head, because I think of shame as having a ping pong relationship with behavior. So shame triggers the behavior, and then the behavior triggers the shame. The lie of shame is I am bad instead of I have done bad. And so I think that a lot of this comes down to, kind of connecting with your own core existential human dignity and deciding that you want to live from that place instead of acting outside of your own dignity and integrity. And so for a lot of us, where we have low self-worth because of different things in life, that's a bit of a journey of rebuilding that and connecting with our core dignity just as human beings on a very fundamental level. We're chosen, we're here for a purpose, we are created in this beautiful way. And so I think for me, that's where a lot of the work lies as well. But I think you hit the nail on the head with the shame piece. This book, Raised on Porn, goes really in depth into this stuff in very helpful, practical ways. So
When's it available?
We're going to the printer right now.
Okay,
I'm not exactly sure. It's in the next few months.
Just give us an update and we'll post it.
Okay, awesome.
When it's available.
So I'm leaving out all those steps. I think that's probably a bigger conversation for another time, but people can get a hold of the book. And I'm just grateful to be here. I love, that you guys are doing a 12-month. I mean, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's absolutely what's needed. So
we'd love to bring you back on and maybe even go through the book a little bit and talk about it and just continue this conversation. To me, this isn't a one-time conversation. This really is, how do we partner? How do we continue to, one, in sex slave trafficking, to crush the pornography industry as far as the, brain geek guys, and
Mind geek,
and mind geek, sorry. And then, my heart also just crumbles for these men and women that are literally trapped. And I have some friends that help the women specifically, but my heart just breaks for them. So, I just think continuing the conversation and staying in touch and continuing to band together, because that's really what it is. This goes beyond denominational lines.
Totally.
Same thing with what we're doing. This is not a denomination. This is not a Christian or non-Christian thing.
Yeah.
Although we believe that God's in the very center of it. This is actually a war on families, a war on men and women and children, and we all have to jump in the fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Benji, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on today. It's an
Thank
honor
you. Yeah.
to sit here and an honor to be with you, and man, to see what you've done in the war that you're waging, the charge that you're leading it is so brave. And I appreciate your time and your effort and your energy, and things that most people will never see the sacrifice. You go in undercover and doing that. It makes me emotional. I appreciate it. You're paying a price that most people won't see, the price that you paid for that. So guys, be praying for Benji and his family.
Thank you.
Feel free to donate to what they're doing. And Benji, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I
appreciate
appreciate
you.
it. Yep. For sure.